Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Current Affairs Unfiltered. I'm your host, Paige Fullman. This week, we are focusing on a more local race. We are focusing on an Illinois State Senate race in the 9th District. There are two candidates, I believe, running right now, and I will be interviewing Patrick Hanley. I found Patrick because I was waiting at the train stop on my way to work one day, and a woman approached me with a clipboard and was like, "Will you sign your name on this?" And I said, "Sure, who's this guy?" Did some research on him, and once again, fell in love with his ideas. The just career that he's had is very interesting, and to take that to the state level is something so vital and important right now, especially in a state that is very focused on opposing Donald Trump and his agenda. But more about Patrick. Patrick Hanley is a son of the 9th District, born in Evanston and raised in Northbrook and Glenview by a single mom of 4 kids after his father died when he was 9. Public schools, public parks, the public library, and public safety, paired with social safety net programs and student loans, afforded the Hanleys stability and opportunity now out of reach for too many families in Illinois and across the district. Patrick spent a decade in Washington, D.C., serving in the U.S. Senate and Department of Justice before joining the Asia Group, where he advised U.S. businesses in Asia Pacific. Patrick traveled regularly to China, Southeast Asia, and India, spending a year in Hong Kong, where he established a small financial services firm. During that time, he took a leave of absence to organize on the Obama campaign in Virginia. He returned home to earn a master's degree in public policy and business administration from the University of Chicago and volunteer in Northbrook to build the local Democratic Party and advocate for working families. Without further ado, here is my conversation with Patrick. Patrick, thank you so much for being here. It is so great to have you on.
Great to be here. Thanks so much for inviting me.
Of course, it is my pleasure. So I'm wondering if we could start with who you are as a person. You grew up in the 9th District and often talk on your website about how public schools, public programs, and the social safety nets that we have shaped your family's stability. How does that background shape the vision that you have for public service today?
Yeah, that's right. And again, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's great to chat with you a little bit. I grew up in Northbrook, which is kind of a suburb north of Chicago. And I was one of 4 kids. We had an idyllic upbringing. We biked in the streets and played at the playgrounds and, we're outside half of our childhoods and had a really great time. And when I was 9 years old, my dad passed away and my mom was a librarian and she raised 4 kids by herself in this town of Northbrook. And what could have been just a tragedy for any other family all over the country was fine. Like it was a personal tragedy, but it didn't derail us as people. And through public schools, the public library, public parks, student loans, a generous community, me and my siblings were able to to follow our paths towards the careers that we have. My older brother is now a pastor. My little sister is a pediatric ER nurse. My little brother is a therapist. And now I've found my path towards public service. So clearly something was in the water. But I think that upbringing and my just incredible hero of a mom taught us how the social safety net ought to work and how communities can come together to lift all of our families when disaster strikes. And I think when I went to school and I met folks not from Northbrook in kind of different settings, that's when I realized that the way that we were raised wasn't the norm. It was actually kind of rare. And to me, that basic injustice is the engine that drives my progressive democratic politics. I think everybody deserves the safety net and the security of that my family was afforded that helped me get to where I am.
Absolutely. I always find it very interesting when candidates will talk about using the safety net as they grew as they were adults and then in some ways want to shut the door behind them. So it's refreshing to hear you say, "Oh, I benefited from this and everybody else should also be able to benefit from this."
Totally. Wedge my foot in the door and then open it further.
Right, exactly. So you've spent time in Washington in the private sector and also in local organizing. What finally pushed you over the hump to step into the, running for public office arena and run for state senate here in Illinois?
Yeah, absolutely. And gestures broadly to what's happening in the world. No, I really do think that right now at this moment, there is no more important place for public servants with certain skill sets to be than in state capitals. The federal government is obviously totally dysfunctional. We are either in gridlock or the federal government is coming after Democratic states, as is happening right now. And so I think defense plays out in Washington, but we can push on the priorities that we care about in state capitals that are controlled by Democrats. So that's a really inspiring mission to me. And I think there's a lot to be done in Springfield and a lot of opportunities still there. And so that's what drives me towards the state Senate race at this moment.
That's a very interesting take, and not one that I've thought about a lot, but that's so right. Like, yes, Washington is where, quote unquote, like the power is, but at the state level, like that's where you're getting these redistricting maps. That's where you're getting the pushback to the Trump agenda. Like it is the place to be, I fear.
That's right. And that's where you get the most ambitious climate action plans. That's where you get really interesting progressive policies around healthcare or helping families or daycare, childcare, the things that people really care about. You know, the states really are the laboratories of democracy. And I think that is a trend that will only increase as the federal government continues to do nothing structural.
No, isn't that the truth? So running for office is, not exactly a small feat. It's a little vulnerable. It takes up a lot of your time. What for you has been the most surprising or challenging part of your campaign so far?
I think the most surprising and humbling thing about running for office is when you stand up on the stage and you announce you're going to do it. We did it in my backyard back in May. The number of people that come out of the woodwork and say, you know what, I'm here to help. The number of volunteers that I've worked with over the years that are now happy to spend unpaid time and put their labor and effort into my candidacy because, and I'm reminded this every day, this really isn't about me going to Springfield. This is about building a community of action that can get shit done in Springfield when I'm there and to raise other folks with me when I am. And so I'm just so humbled by the people that have come out of the woodwork to help. Surprising kind of in the negative way. I don't know if it's a surprise so much as it is just kind of coming to terms with the reality of politics in 2025. You spend a lot of time asking people for money. That is just the truth. And it is not fun. It's not comfortable, especially as a first-time candidate. Yeah, it is what it is. Here we are. That's one of the things that I want to change in Springfield.
Well, I've noticed a lot as I've been talking to candidates running for a variety of races, whether it's state level, federal. A lot of people have the whole money in politics thing like as a number one concern for them, which not really sure how that came to be. It's always been a very popular issue with the public, but not a very popular issue to people that hold office, probably because they benefit from the fact that we can have thousands and millions of dollars in campaigns. But I'm hopeful that, things will change given how many people are making this a priority and making this a bigger issue and getting it out into the public.
And that's true for, I think, a lot of really cool, good government reforms and common sense reforms that I think maybe our generation has grown up just kind of embracing. This really is a generational year for Illinois and then for states around the country and for Congress to an extent. There's a lot of new leaders that are going to come up through the primary cycle this next year. And so it's really important that we pick ones that we believe in and then also are going to have the characteristics and the qualities to actually get shit done when they go to their legislatures. I do think that one thing that's exciting about 2026 is we complain a lot about the Democratic Party today, and that's totally fair. We're going to pick a new one next year. We're going to pick new leaders that go and represent the Democratic Party and represent the platform and communicate the party. And so that's a huge responsibility and a great opportunity for us.
Right. I absolutely see the midterms in 2026 as I know it's not a presidential election, but I absolutely see it as a change election. People are experiencing big emotions from, straight up anger to frustration to, whatever kind of semi-negative emotion you want to put on it. It's bringing candidates out that are good and have fresh new ideas that are pushing the box, much like yourself. Like, it's very inspiring to see the people that are throwing their hat in the ring and going, put me in, coach. Like, I'm ready to do it.
Yeah, it is. And honestly, on this side of the equation, it's humbling. It's humbling to know that you're part of this kind of generational turnover in the party. And to anybody out there who the petition deadline is still a few weeks away in Illinois, I'm sure it is in other states as well. If anybody out there is on the fence, not sure whether they want to jump in, this is the year to do it. This is the year that we reinvent the party. And I think hopefully begin the the broader take back of this country.
Right. Well, this is going to sound so awful coming out loud, but I've always been a little bit of the belief that to run for office, you have to be a little bit of a narcissist. Like, you kind of have to
Sure.
think, like, I'm the one that can do this.
Yeah.
However, I will say that with these elections and the candidates that I've spoken to, I'm not getting that vibe as much anymore. It is very much,
Yeah.
I want to go in there. I want to hit the ground running. I want to make change. Like, of course, you still have to believe that you are the best one to do the job, but it's very much not as much focused on the candidate than it is
Yeah.
about the broader story of what the state is, what the country is. Like, it's much bigger than the individual candidates this time.
Which is a huge help, because if it was all about me, I wouldn't be able to do this. Like, I just don't have that personality type. It just wouldn't drive me. I will say that you're right. I think in peacetime, shall we call it, you need something that is going to wake you up every single morning and have you go make uncomfortable phone calls, knock a bunch of doors, ask people for too much, and then go kind of run through the tape. And that is a really hard thing to do. So ego is one great way to motivate yourself. I will say, in times like this, the stakes are so high and the calling is so great that I think it's enough for a lot of folks that wouldn't otherwise have that ego to drive them to do it, which is exciting.
Absolutely. So let's talk a little bit about environment and sustainability. You've led on those issues locally. How do you think your work in Winnetka and beyond translates to what you'd fight for in Springfield in terms of the environment?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for the question. The climate, energy volatility, and renewable energy and sustainable energy in the future are things that I care about deeply, and I think are the crisis of our generation for the coming decades. I mean, we have this democratic crisis and we have the crisis of affordability, and that is near-term pain, and I hope and I know that we're going to resolve them. But climate is something that we're going to be dealing with for the rest of our lives as we slow fossil fuels and then ultimately turn back the level of emissions that are already in the atmosphere to prevent our planet from getting cooked. So I care deeply about this one. The last 2 years, I've been organizing and advocating against coal power in my little town of Winnetka. We're one of the few municipalities in Illinois that are part of this municipal co-op group that buys 80% of our power from coal plants in downstate Illinois and Kentucky. And so I've organized and I've learned and I've fought around this issue for a couple of years. And what I learned was you really do need to elevate things like this to the state level, because municipalities just don't have the incentive and they don't have the scope to deal with issues themselves. They need help. And one of the ways that we're going to help places like Winnetka is we're going to pass legislation that causes utilities to be a bit more transparent and accountable, so that they're making economic decisions. Because one of the big changes in the last few years is adding new fossil fuels actually has a lower ROI than adding new renewables. And so it is the economic choice, not just the climate choice, to transition over towards green energy. We also need to add more transmission wires in the state. We need to incentivize battery storage in the state to make our solar fleet make more sense and bring down costs overall of electricity, especially at a time when electricity is so expensive and volatile, that it's really important that we kind of have a statewide approach towards this green transition. We've set ourselves really great green goals, and now we need to go out and meet them. So it's important that we have candidates that care about this intrinsically and are going to go fight for it in Springfield.
So the environment is an issue that I feel like weighed so heavily on so many people, probably in Trump's first term, and it's kind of something that's fallen to the wayside a little bit in terms of the most depressing things. So it's refreshing to hear that that's something that's important to you and something that you have continued to fight for, even in the face of all the scary, horrible things that are going on, and are making real progress on.
Thank you. Yeah. And I will say, on the doors and talking to volunteers, it's not an issue that shows up in the top 5 kind of polling results when you look at the data, but it is something that lights people up on the trail when you talk about it. It's an anxiety, it's a deep anxiety that's sitting below all those immediate concerns, but it's there.
Right.
And if you talk about it, that resonates with people. Because people are worried about the long term. They do want to build a future that they can believe in, right? I think one of the big challenges facing Illinois, facing my community, and facing the United States right now is folks think about climate change, they think about AI, they think about the erosion of democracy and rights, and they don't know what next year is going to look like.
Right.
And so for candidates to speak to a future that is going to be sustainable, that's going to be prosperous and inclusive, that is going to be progressive, that you can count on, I think is helps folks solve some of their anxieties at this moment.
Right. Well, and that's the part that like I struggle with. It's very hard for me to even think of the midterms as something that's tangible given
Sure.
the uncertainty around what is going on. It's very difficult to try to square the circles about like I'm talking to these candidates that are running, but like, I'm still kind of in the camp of are we going to have a midterm election?
Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. I will say, thankfully, this is going to be a deep cut for our listeners, but we've got the Battlestar Galactica effect working for us in that our elections are so manual and they're so analog and they're so localized that I think it's going to be impossible for federal legislation to change the way at least states hold our midterm primaries, let alone our
Right.
midterm elections. So I think
Right.
we're good heading into next year, although intimidation is a whole other thing and red
Right.
states are a whole other thing. But I feel good about elections in Illinois. And that at least gives me some confidence heading into this election.
Absolutely. So the ninth district is very diverse. Got a
Yeah.
lot of different characters in this district. It's, in my opinion, fairly politically active district.
Yes.
How do you see your role in bridging different communities and making sure that all voices feel represented?
I think that's so important because we do have such a diverse community and diverse across kind of racial and religious differences, diverse across socioeconomic differences, ranging from the neighborhoods of Evanston and Skokie up to the lofty heights of Kenilworth and Winnetka. And so you've got a lot of opinions and you've got a lot of thoughts about the way that policy should work. And I think one of the jobs of a good elected official is to show up, to listen, to show respect, and to build trusted relationships with each of those communities so that when we make decisions and when we've got to tell hard truths or when we've got to develop complicated policy solutions to the problems faced by our residents, we have stakeholders who know us and who trust us and who can participate in that process.
Right. Well, I worked with a statewide organization in Illinois in 2024, and it was inspiring to see the connections that they'd built with people with officials in Springfield, and just how easy it was to call upon them and speak to them, and how
Yeah.
receptive they were to the conversation that we were having.
Yeah.
I'll always be amazed about the way that state level officials are willing to come and listen,
Yeah.
even if we're not part of their district necessarily. Like, they're always willing to open their ears and be listeners to what people are trying to push.
Yeah, absolutely. And it helps them do their jobs better, right? And I do think that scale sometimes can be the enemy of democracy and the enemy of responsiveness, because at a certain scale, if there's a million people you got to worry about, that's genuinely a really difficult challenge to try and get to everybody and listen to everybody. But at the state level, the state Senate level and the state representative level, these districts are small enough that you really can tune in and get to know the statewide advocacy organizations, the community leaders, community members, so that you are, responsive and democratic.
So if elected, how do you plan to stay connected to the district and making sure in
Yeah.
essence that your ears are still on the ground and listening to what people are concerned about?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'm an organizer by constitution. This is what I do. This is who I am. I'm right now in the midst of organizing a rapid response group in my township and in kind of the district as well. When problems come up, I cannot help myself but jump in, get involved, and try and help. So I know that is going to keep pulling me back to issues in the district, even as I'm spending more and more time in Springfield. It's just kind of how I'm wired.
That's reassuring. I like that. I like that response.
Yeah.
So as you said, you have spent a lot of time organizing, and especially now organizing against the Trump era overreach, I'm going to say, from,
Sure.
no King's rallies to Operation Swing State. What lessons do you take from those experiences in grassroots organizing, and what do they teach you about what it really means to be a leader?
Yeah, and I would say the most important lesson I've taken from all my organizing experiences, kind of from the Obama campaign a million years ago to more recent experiences like at the New True Democrats or Operation Swing State or Rapid Response or Migrant Support. And that is just the depth of talent and knowledge and compassion and conviction that we have in this community. And so I find that I'm leading best when I'm creating a space for really smart, really passionate, wonderful people to get together and then take a step back and kind of let them lead the charge. I think sometimes people need somebody to take the first step, after which they can take things and run with it. And that has always been kind of my experience with organizing, and I think part of the success of the things that we've worked on over the last few years.
Really feels like you're embodying the whole saying of be a leader, not a follower. You are the leader and others will follow. And that's not a bad thing. I'm very much a follower in the sense that I like for somebody else to say, we're doing this. And I go, I'm on board. Like I'll be there when you tell me to be there.
But you know what's interesting? Oftentimes those followers become the best leaders.
Yeah.
When you give them the opportunity.
Everybody starts out as a little bit of a follower and like being told, what the best moves are, where they should go, whatever the situation is. But you're right. Sure. I think those people do end up kind of growing into their own and creating their own leadership space.
For sure.
So let's move on to some of your platforms and policies. You have said that Illinois needs to use its 10th Amendment powers to push back against federal overreach. People are probably hearing that and going, what the hell is the 10th Amendment? I don't remember that one. So can you explain what the 10th Amendment is? And also, what does using it to push back against federal overreach look like in practice?
So we got to go back to our civics for a second. The United States is not a unitary nation like other countries are. No, we're not a centralized country. We are a confederation. We are a federation of states. Our states in this country are sovereign. And when we wrote the Constitution and passed it through the Constitutional Convention, the Bill of Rights was tacked on to the Constitution very early on. The 10th Amendment of the Bill of Rights basically says whatever is not specifically delineated to the federal government that we're now creating is actually sovereign to the states. And so what I'm saying is something that is a bit uncomfortable for a Democrat, because frankly, states' rights in the past has been the province of racists and bigots and states trying to keep rights away from their own citizens in the past. But what I am saying is when we have a federal government that is targeting our people, that is coming after us, when we have a federal government that we cannot trust, when we have a federal government that is sending enforcement into our cities and into our neighborhoods, harassing people, picking up American citizens, and by the way, breaking laws that then have to go to court and end up, delivering injunctions to the federal government to stop them, like what just happened in Chicago yesterday. When that is the case, I think it is on states like Illinois to explore the extent of our 10th Amendment protections. What is it that that is sovereign to this state? What do we control that the federal government actually has no say in? One simple one that I'll just kind of throw out there is the way that the federal government regulates a lot of business and our economy is through the Interstate Commerce Clause that basically says when there's trade that happens across state boundaries, then the federal government has all sorts of powers to regulate that trade. But if trade is happening within a state, that falls under the 10th Amendment. That's one of those things that Illinois actually has a tremendous say over. So when we talk about regulating medicines like mifepristone, and if the federal government were to overstep and say, you know what, that is no longer allowed to be sold across state boundaries, that's an area where Illinois can step in, can either buy or grow our own companies, our own supply chain, and make sure that people, families, women in Illinois can access that life-saving medication here without the federal government's involvement.
I'm going to play devil's advocate a little bit.
Good.
Say people are concerned about, that seems like a slippery slope.
Sure.
Perhaps that's starting to sound a little bit like we're starting to toy with the idea of seceding from the union. What is your response to that?
I would say at this point in our history, we are so integrated as a country, and the federal government is so large and so powerful over decades and decades of growth since World War II that things like secession, Civil War, I understand why people's minds go there, but it is impossible, unlikely to impossible. I cannot envision it. It will not happen. Rather, I think what's more likely is we have a federal government that becomes more and more incompetent, that might get smaller and smaller as representatives in Washington kind of cut out programs and departments and return tax money to the states, that creates an opportunity for like-minded states, places like Illinois or New York or California or Minnesota, Massachusetts, to get together and to rebuild some of the shared programs that we know help all of our residents. So hiring back EPA scientists, hiring back cancer researchers, hiring meteorologists to keep an eye on the skies for us. If the federal government's not going to do it, and we think it's still a good idea, there are ways that states can partner around shared concerns and build shared assets. And
Right.
I understand, that is on the path towards something like a secession. I just think that is so impossible and beyond the pale
Right.
for all sorts of other reasons that it's helpful to think about it in a different context.
Right. Well, we're already seeing it with
Yeah,
California, Washington, and Oregon and
that's
their
right.
vaccine thing. And I think
And
a
Illinois.
bunch of states did. Oh, yeah. And yeah, Illinois did it. And a coalition of states on the East Coast did the same thing. Like, it's beneficial. Like, it's going to benefit everybody. I don't think a lot of people realize that.
Yeah. And that's a trend that I'm afraid isn't going away. And look, like, not 4 years ago or whatever it was, I was a big hearted, big government progressive. I really wanted the federal government to do a really good job to provide healthcare for people, to make sure that everybody is accessing great education, all the things that we wanted a good progressive federal government to do. And I think what has changed in my mind, and maybe what is broken in our national politics, is we have become so gridlocked and divided that I just don't expect the federal government to be able to do anything effectively until we figure out some sort of a majoritarian coalition to take federal government back over again. So, in the absence of a Washington, D.C., what is the responsibility of a Springfield? And I'd say it's a pretty big one.
Right. So you touched on this a little bit, but in and around our community, we have ICE agents quite literally kidnapping people. One of your, I don't want to say boldest, but it's bound to get some backlash at some level. But one of your boldest proposals is to unmask ICE and increase accountability for federal enforcement. Why do you think that fight is worth having, even if it ends up in court, which I'm sure it will, and I'm sure
No
the
doubt.
Trump administration would have a fit about it?
No doubt. Absolutely. And thank you for bringing this up. I think this is one of those areas where Democrats need to show that we're fighting. We need to tell a story about something that the federal government is doing that we believe is illegal or we believe shouldn't happen. And then we need to fight about how to stop them and roll it back. And for this one in particular, when ICE agents, DHS agents, ATF folks, when federal enforcement comes to Chicago and uses aggressive tactics, fires chemical weapons into protesters, picks up U.S. citizens, harasses even detainees without undocumented or without documents, harasses anybody, that first of all is immoral and terrible in its own right, and it's awful for the people that are affected. But second, it destroys the confidence that people have in all of our law enforcement, from local to state to whatever. So because people don't necessarily divide out what is federal versus what is Chicago police versus what is, the Evanston Police Department. So when people have terrible experiences with law enforcement, or if they worry or they suspect that a hospital or a local police officer or somebody is going to turn them in to a federal law enforcement that they can't identify and that they don't trust, that comes with all sorts of other terrible outcomes too for people's health and people's safety. So if the federal government is going to take these steps to send unaccountable masked dudes to come and harass our people, I think that's a really important fight that we need to have in Illinois and tell them that they cannot. And look, if the supremacy clause shuts that down, and if for whatever reason a judge decides that it is a core to the mission of ICE agents to be masked and unidentifiable, then so be it. But we need to have that fight. We need to have that fight in the open.
No, absolutely. Well, I think you're correct. I think it does need to be something that's out in the open, because there's so many people complaining about take your mask off. Like, if you're truly doing something that is fully okay and legal, you should say it with your chest, should show your face. And if we have it out in the open and the judge does rule they are able to have their mask on, then I feel like that's just another fighting point. It's just another reason to say, like, okay, we need to keep going. We need to keep having this fight.
That's right. And it gives Democratic candidates something to talk about in the campaign trail, because what can change the way that the judge rules is new laws in Congress.
Right. Right. No, absolutely. Back to the kind of coalition of states argument. You have argued that Illinois should partner with these states. How do you see that actually working? Like, who do you envision our partners being in this fight, considering we live next to a pretty much all red states are surrounding us. Who do you see our partners being in this?
Yeah, so I actually see this as a pretty good trust building exercise. And what's kind of nice about this is we're not saying join us on every issue, right? We're not saying join this kind of progressive compact and we're all going to, hold hands on everything that we care about. We can be really targeted about this, and we can model ourselves on the Great Lakes Compact, which was the result of the Great Lakes Charter. And that basically got all the Great Lakes states and several Canadian provinces together around the shared resource that is our great freshwater lakes, which now does tremendous work in terms of keeping pollution out of the lake, monitoring how much fresh water is being used, thinking about invasive species in the lake and then removing them. And that is a compact that includes red and blue states, as well as, again, international provinces. And so if we pick a shared resource, like a geography or a natural feature, that's why kind of the environmental stuff is such a good place to start with this, or finding common approaches to scarce resources like fishing is such a good way to go about this, because we can find common ground with places like Iowa or even Nebraska when we talk about farming and talk about kind of, the way that we engage in farming regulations and subsidies. Those are shared interests. And if the federal government's not going to do it, maybe we can step in and do something ourselves.
Right. So you've also talked about recruiting federal talent from the pool of people that have been kicked out of their jobs, fired, whatever way they departed, such as teachers, nurses, scientists, whatever it was, who are kind of feeling abandoned, a little sidelined. How do you propose we make Illinois become a destination for these professionals?
Yeah. Fortunately, I think we kind of are, in part by virtue of what the federal government has done, and in part by virtue of the laws that are being put in place by our surrounding states, places like Indiana, Iowa, Missouri, to an extent, Kentucky. Illinois is the destination in the Midwest for progressive-minded folks who believe in the rule of law, democracy, and freedom of speech. So when journalists are fired from their publications, or when newspapers or media outlets are closed in red states, we are the destination. And I think we should embrace that. And I do think that as time goes on and as the federal government continues to make these disastrous decisions and states become kind of the focal point of policy, you're going to start to see differences in the quality of education, in the quality of the media, in the quality of healthcare in a place like Illinois versus a place like Indiana. And so I think we should embrace that, and we should attract the talent that is out on the market right now. And I do think that talent is coming to Chicago, which is great. Now we got to make sure that we incentivize different places across the state where that talent can find work, partner with other states, as we've kind of said before, to hire back talent that we can't afford ourselves, but maybe could in an interstate compact, and make sure that the headquarters of this kind of new progressive subnational approach to the shared priorities that we have is Chicago and is Illinois.
So you are not of the view that Illinois is full and we cannot possibly
no,
take on new residents.
If anything, Illinois has been shrinking compared to other states for the last 30 years. So another part of my platform, just to very, very quickly go back, when I made the decision to run for state senate, I got myself all excited around this platform of building an Illinois that is safe, green, and growing, safe for LGBTQ plus loved ones, and safe to send our kids to schools, green for the reasons we've talked about, and growing, because the state of Illinois has been shrinking relative to the states for the last 30 years, and our economy is a mature, kind of larger economy, but it hasn't been growing. And I do think that it's important for Democrats in Springfield and other states to make sure that we have an economic growth agenda where folks can see a future in this state, where families from Florida want to move to Illinois and reverse that out-migration, because our schools are better and our healthcare is better. And you can say what you want to here. And if you are LGBTQ plus, or your loved ones are, you're not going to be harassed. You're going to be taken care of. You can have reproductive healthcare and justice in this state if you need it. And I think those are some pretty good calling cards for folks to move here, if we can also get the dynamism of the local economy pumping again.
I'm very eager to see what the 2030 census brings, because there are a lot of people that are in red states and are like, okay, like time to get out. There's
That's
still
right.
the typical people who leave the state because they retire and go down to places like Florida and wherever the hell else old people retire to. So I'm interested to see if the politics of the day and the politics of this decade have shifted that in any way. Plus the fact that, like you said, we do need to revamp our economy just a smidge.
We do. And also, economic growth in Illinois is going to help us pay down kind of past fiscal burdens that we're still
Right.
struggling to get out from under. So, strong economic growth here should be a top priority for Democrats.
Right. Absolutely. So let's move a little bit outside of Illinois, just thinking about the country as a whole, kind of just where we are as a nation. For people who might feel overwhelmed by politics and just powerless in the face of what is going on in Washington, what role do you think states and citizens play in holding the line?
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about what the states can do. So let me kind of move to the citizens and the communities. I do think that when we look at, brilliant works that have been written about past other countries that have experienced authoritarianism and fascism and descents into these centralized, corrupt countries, the stumbling block and the source of hope is always communities. It's always communities. And so people getting together to do just about anything, people getting together to go for a run, people getting together to read books, people getting together to do political action and host protests, take care of neighbors, provide mutual aid to folks that are impacted. Those are the building blocks of a resilient community that can prevent the worst excesses of authoritarianism and also build back state and federal governments that are no longer corrupt and that get rid of the incompetence and the cruelty of past administrations. So I put my hope into people that wake up this morning, people wake up tomorrow and say, you know what, I'm fed up, I've had enough. I'm going to go join a couple people down the street and start something or join something to begin to rebuild a society that we recognize again. And that's always been a strength of the United States. I mean, if you read de Tocqueville, that was the big surprise when he traveled around the country, that we had these religious communities and we had social communities and we had clubs. We were a nation of clubs and associations, more so than we were governments. So this is a very old school American thing that we're talking about. And I do think that it's our best bet against this rogue, dare I say, fascist government in Washington.
I don't think you're wrong to say that, but that has been the part ever since Donald Trump became president the second time. That has been the part that has given me the most hope in all of this, is just the outpouring from communities. Like, I remember, and I talked about this on another episode with somebody I recorded with, but when that first kind of viral video came out about ICE being in somewhere outside of Boston and how all the neighbors came out of their house and are following the ICE agents, recording on their phones, that's when I was like, okay, like, this is not going to happen silently. And people are making sure that it is not happening silently. And that has continued to happen. There are videos every day and people shouting from the rooftops about what is going on. Moments like that are what keep me going, that, like, we as a state and we as a nation are not going to, take this lying down.
Courage is contagious is something that our governor talks about a lot. And I think he's exactly right. And also, people rise to the moment. I mean, it is terrible. I mean, people are being hurt and worse. This is an awful moment in American history for us to live through. And we are also seeing extremely inspiring, courageous people with conviction and compassion and great progressive ideals and good ideas and charisma that are coming out of this moment. And it's inspiring to watch and it's inspiring to be a part of.
No, absolutely. So you talked a little bit about hope in your last answer, but as you're looking ahead to your campaign, we're coming up on the primary. What is giving you hope for Illinois and for the future of democracy here?
I would say when I knock on doors and when I talk to people, to a person, they fully get the stakes of the moment. Nobody is saying, it's not a big deal. You're worrying about this too much. Forget it. Everybody says, okay, what can we do? What more can Illinois do to protect our neighbors? What can I do to get involved and to fight back? What can you do as a candidate to go and carry that message to Springfield? Everybody gets it. Everybody's on the same page. And that gives me a lot of hope because, again, it's the people that are going to provide the resilience that we need to protect us ultimately from what's happening in Washington and what's happening increasingly in Chicago.
Yeah, that, like, one-on-one connection with voters, like the knocking on doors, like the being able to speak to people is always something, like that human touch is so important. And, you know, from your perspective, I'm sure like it's like, oh, people are getting it. And, you know, they're in the same vein of like the people being out in the streets and recording things and like making sure that they're not doing this without it being shown to the world. Those moments are so important that people get it, that you as a candidate are out there and speaking to people, and you care about your constituents. People love that.
Well, I will say the best piece of advice I've ever heard about somebody who wants to go into politics is you can't do this well unless you like people. And you can't succeed unless they know you like them. And it's such a simple thing, but I think it's such good advice. And that's held true, you know, to me so far.
That's honestly probably groundbreaking advice. And I think there are some people in Congress that probably should have listened to it, because some of them, I'm not so sure that they like people.
Yep.
All right. Well, that is all I have for you. Do you feel like I missed anything at all?
No, this has been terrific. I so appreciate you having me on the show. It's been a lot of fun chatting with you.
No,
and
of course.
You know, these are terrible times, but there's also something inspiring about living through them and trying our best to meet the moment.
Well, right. And that's what my like current perspective is. When I have kids and they come back from school and they go, what were you doing when like Donald Trump was rolling back everybody's rights and the ICE agents were snatching people off the street? I want to be able to look my kids in the eyes and say, I did everything I could with the tools that I had available. I was out at protests. I started this podcast to try to start conversation and get people to understand what was going on. Like, I want my kids to be proud of what I did to try to fight back.
Yeah. And no doubt they will be.
Fingers crossed. Unless they tell me my podcast was awful and embarrassing, then we're going to have a problem.
And by the way, they're upset that they were growing up in Canada because it all went to hell. No, I'm just kidding.
Mom, why can't we live in Chicago? Well,
we did our best.
I tried.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on again. I don't think we mentioned it at the top of the episode, but I do live in your district, and I found you because a woman approached me as I was waiting for the train to go to work, and I signed the petition sheet and then went, oh shit, I should probably make sure that I didn't just sign my name up for somebody who's going to further dismantle things. So I checked, and I really, really liked you, but I'm very excited to be able to vote for you in March and hopefully again this November. I think you have an amazing and concrete vision for the state of Illinois, and there are so many people that will sit here and say Illinois is a failing state, like this state sucks, da-da-da-da. You have a vision that speaks to correcting that thought, and I love that, because this is a fantastic state. Anyone who's listened to me speak for more than 10 minutes knows I have always been pro-Illinois. I've always been pro-Chicago. Like, I love living here, and you will have to pull me out of the state with a limp body, because I'm not leaving under any other circumstances.
Thank you so much, Paige. It's been such a great time chatting with you and getting to know you. I'm so grateful for your support and for your vote. I'm still going to knock on your door in Glenview, as we're going to knock every single door in your neighborhood. And I agree. I couldn't agree more. We have a great state that we should all be so proud of. And yes, we have problems, and we have serious problems, but they're not problems that can't be resolved by good people in office, by great people in our communities, and by fighting for the things that we believe in and putting people first.
Absolutely. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Paige. Take care.
Thank you guys so much for tuning into this episode of Current Affairs Unfiltered. I really hope that you guys have been enjoying the candidates as much as I enjoy recording with them. Like I said, I swear I say this after every time I record with a candidate, but I always find it just so insightful to understand this new crop of Democrats, because the 2026 midterms have given us so many new candidates and new faces with new ideas and different visions for how this whole country is supposed to work. And I feel like it gives us as listeners and learners the insight to see kind of what direction the Democratic Party is headed in, even if the higher-ups that be at the Democratic Party don't want to put a name on that vision just yet. But I will see you guys next week as we move on to another candidate, this one further south in the state of Illinois. And this one is challenging an incumbent. So that will be an interesting conversation to have. Anyways, if you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, leave a review, or share it with someone who could use this information. And as always, if you have questions, topic suggestions, or just want to say hi, you can find me on social media at Current Affairs Unfiltered Pod on Instagram, or send me an email at currentaffairs.unfilteredpod@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Keep asking questions, stay engaged, and don't forget to memorize your Bill of Rights. I will see you guys next week.